You don't care what you're doing to me. I've been down in the ruins so deep. All the games that you played, all the love you forsaken, you let it slip away. You don't care what you're doing to me. Every setback, every mishap, every time you say you gon' change. Say you get it, you regret it, I forgive it, but you stay the same. You should cry an ocean for me, for the dumb shit and the damage you've done. Cause I've been crying oceans for weeks. Tried to fight it, but I'm drowning alone. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa. Shed a tear for me, baby, if you dare. Maybe then it would show me that you care. Cause your words never match what you do, how you act, so I can't just take you back. Never fool me once, never fool me twice. If you love me, you'll react. You should cry an ocean for me, for the dumb shit and the damage you've done. Cause I've been crying oceans for weeks. Tried to fight it, but I'm drowning alone. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa. Every setback, every mishap, every time you say you gon' change. Say you get it, you regret it, I forgive it, but you stay the same. You should cry an ocean for me, for the dumb shit and the damage you've done. Cause I've been crying oceans for weeks. Tried to fight it, but I'm drowning alone. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa. Sister, save me now. Save me now. Whoa.
So you're asking me, Mama Cass, what the heck is Wetiko culture? The short answer, to paraphrase a dish soap commercial from my youth, is you're living in it. We all are. We are living in Wetiko culture. There are other names which have been used. Radical feminists call it the patriarchy. Deep ecologists call it civilization. Many First Nations people call it settler culture or invader culture. It has been called the rat race, living in the machine, suburbia, industrialized capitalism, progress, modern life, the American dream. To name its effects on us, or the mechanism by which it maintains itself, we can use a term that Dee Graham coined in her book Loving to Survive, societal Stockholm Syndrome. Essentially, we are all trapped in a relationship with a domestic abuser, and that abuser is the very culture that we live in. We are being held prisoner, and we have identified with our captor. This is the coping strategy. If we just capitulate, we will survive. The great technological philosopher Lewis Mumford used a phrase to describe this unwritten contract by which we are all held as captives within the system that exploits us. He called it the Magnificent Bride. The form of the capitulation which is required may change somewhat in detail as the details of the systems change, but it is always a bribe. We take a bribe of a good life in exchange for wholly giving up the possibility of living in any other way. We all grew up hearing these messages. Work hard, stay in school, get the good job, do what you're told and be what you're told. If you work hard enough and fast enough and excel enough, then you will get the nice house. You will get the fancy car, the best person who loves you. You'll have the coolest clothes. You will look so good. Everyone will like you. You'll have everything you ever wanted, and you will be happy, happy, happy. You can live in comfort, but you must live this way, with all costs, in order to get what you perceive as the benefit. Although you're probably not even perceiving that this is a deal that you are making. It's always been that way. We're all frogs slowly being boiled alive. Like living in an abusive relationship, we know that we're not happy, but it can be hard to put your finger on what is wrong. You've most likely been convinced that it is you that is wrong. We all know that those people who can't cut it, that aren't good enough, that don't make the grade, end up cast outside. It's their own fault. We all know this. If you're a loser, you deserve to lose. If you're poor or sick or injured or homeless, then it's because you're inferior, right? They're all just people that are losers, right? If I work hard enough and fast enough and good enough, I won't be there. It can't ever happen to me. And besides, everything is always getting better. Just hang in there. Don't rock the boat. Progress will save us all. Just keep working harder. You'll get ahead. Always the promise of something better. Just ahead. Always progress. This is much like the future fake method of manipulation that a narcissist uses to convince their victim, their dupe, their target, their supply, to remain within their thrall. It will get better. Just hang in there. Give more. Always. You must give more. Just give a little bit more. The name that First Nations people of Turtle Island give to a narcissist is Wetiko, a cannibal that consumes human spirits to live, a hungry ghost that always takes and gives nothing but promises, threats, and lies, an abuser who sucks the life out of the victim who they trap. And we are living in a culture that is itself a full-blown narcissist, trapping us with promises, threats, and lies, dangling a magnificent bribe to force us to stay and give more, and yet more, and ever more. In addition to being a narcissist, this culture also creates, facilitates, and rewards individual narcissists, popular leaders strutting across the world stage, leading us all with promises, threats, and lies. I'm certain that any of us could easily name a half a dozen of these. You all know famous examples. You also probably know examples in your own lives from the smaller stage of your own life. They are everywhere. And there are always more, and yet ever more of them. And so this is why I call our culture, our worldwide civilization, our way of life, Wetiko culture. Welcome to Wetiko culture. Welcome to our nightmare. You've always been here, but you never knew that it is what it is. And we are just not allowed to talk about it. The same way that when we grow up in an abusive family system, we know we are not supposed to talk about it. Let me give you an example. My mom was a very heavy smoker. And when my parents split up, she then married another very heavy smoker. My kids would cough, and my nose was always running. My mom found my constant sniffling to be very annoying, but if we ever tried to open a window, even when we were trapped in a car with 2 chain-smoking adults, we were yelled at and told to shut it because we were letting the heat or the air conditioning out. But I'm not a child anymore. I understand what happened there. My mom had a background of massive abuse within her family, on top of a history of trauma from outside the family, on top of generations of abuse and trauma. None of it ever named or explained. She did the best she could to simply survive, and her addictions were central to her being able to survive. Exposing faults and weaknesses is painful, and to do so outside of a healing process is frankly simply pointless. Mom was defending herself from her own awareness of her own weakness. I didn't understand any of this back then. And I was a child and a girl and powerless. So I couldn't change anything. I understand now. I want you to understand too. Then we can begin to change things. We can start to return to health, turn or return to healthy ways, and turn or return to healthy ways of life. We can return to matriarchal ways of life. We can rematriate.
Storms, they come, they go. They know to ride the breeze. Life is not always still. Find your way back. Let it flow. Guide where to go. Let it flow. Guide where to go.
Welcome back, Radical Homemakers. I'm Mama Cass Bear, and this is my channel, Rematriate. Rematriate is a channel for radical homemakers creating a life made by hand, escaping Wetiko culture to make ourselves a home. And in order to escape from Wetiko culture, we need to fully understand what Wetiko culture is, how it operates, maintains its power, spreads, and inevitably destroys the host that it feeds on, which is, ever so horrifyingly, us. This is part 2 of my Explaining Wetiko Culture series. The last time, I told you all some of my own personal story and about how learning about Wetiko culture helped explain why I had been subjected to so much suffering over my lifetime. And how learning this helped me to survive when my 4 young children were stolen by my ex-husband, who I call Father Demon here because I will never use his name. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, never fear. I will put a link in the description so that you can watch that part first, if you like. I try to overlap a little so that each stands on its own, but it is best if you can watch them in order. So, to briefly summarize, in order to move into part 2, I will just tell you this. I came to learn about Wetiko culture largely through my study of radical feminism and the critical analysis of patriarchy. As I just told you in the intro, patriarchy is Wetiko culture. So, by studying the radical feminist critical analysis of patriarchy, we can learn about the structure and practice of patriarchy and answer the questions that we posed for ourselves at the end of part 1. We posed these questions to ourselves when we learned about atrocity. We learned that atrocity repeats itself in a self-perpetuating cycle of attempting to punish atrocities by committing yet more atrocity. In that video, I said, you can never balance out atrocity by committing further atrocities. This is being displayed on the world stage right now, most poignantly at the time that I make this film in the lands of the Middle East. It is horrible watching it. Basically, what's going on is that there are atrocities being flung back and forth, and all that happens is that the frequency and intensity of atrocity increases like a monstrous form of moral climate change. And so we asked ourselves, can it ever end? Can it ever be fixed? Can we make progress to something better? Something safer? Something kinder? Can there be reform? It's a good question. I told you that the answers to these questions could be found in the work of radical feminist scholars. These scholars, such as Mary Daly, Janice Raymond, Sonia Johnson, Sheila Jeffries, and Andrea Dworkin, have left us a large body of their work of critically analyzing patriarchy. It is only through critical analysis that we can understand how and why patriarchy functions to oppress women and their children. It is only through critical analysis that we can answer the question of whether patriarchy can ever be reformed. Okay, so now let's get into some critical analysis. In the scholarship of radical feminism, there is a recognition that patriarchy can never be reformed. There's a recognition that the underlying cosmology of patriarchal society is such that any attempts at reforming it to create a society that does not exploit women and girls are impossible, doomed to failure. And there will always be a backlash a twisted justification of the status quo that finds new ways to deny any of us, but for a few rare exceptions who serve as tokens, the ability to live a life of dignity, peace, sustainability, and happiness. There is a recognition that the system of patriarchy must feed on the exploitation of females in order to continue, in order to maintain power. Females are the means of reproduction. Every member of the patriarchy, every man, has been born of a woman. So, in order to have new members, every child must be raised up and socialized to become either a man, a ruling member of the patriarchy, or raised up and socialized to become a woman who must be the property of a man to be controlled and exploited. To ensure that this occurs, the maternal bond between each mother and child must be broken. First, all individual women must be broken so that we are not healthy enough to raise healthy children. Because healthy children are resistant to patriarchal socialization. Healthy children are resistant to Wetiko. So each girl must be raised in such a way as to ensure that she is broken, that she is unhealthy and incapable of rearing healthy children when she herself becomes a mother. The best way to ensure that a child grows up to be broken is to break her bond with her mother. After that bond is broken, she is weak, vulnerable, easy to groom into being submissive. Now, a male child is different. A male child is broken in such a way that he sees his mother as inferior and believes that all girls and women must be dominated. In this way, each child is raised to take their proper place within patriarchy. In patriarchy, in civilization, in Wetiko culture, there are only two sorts of people allowed to exist. In patriarchy, they are called men. Men are the dominators. And women. Women are those who are dominated. This is a very strict hierarchy. One above, one below. Those who are superior are Wetiko. They believe the lie at the center, at the core of the Wetiko mind virus. They believe that they are entitled to control and entitled to exploit those that they have deemed to be inferior. And those who are inferior must either submit to domination, submit to having their spirit and mind broken, submit to doing what they are told, or they will be punished and destroyed. Often, the form of that punishment is in the destruction of the maternal bond. Those of us who foolishly attempt to raise our children in such a way as to escape this socialization have our children taken from us, like I had my children taken from me, like many of you who are watching me may have had your children taken from you. Now, the specific details of how our children are taken vary from time to time and from place to place, but they must be taken from us because If that maternal bond is not broken, that maternal bond is the genesis of a matriarchal culture. I talked about this in my shared motherhood video, and I will be talking more about it going forward. But what you need to understand is that the bond, the maternal bond, is the genesis of a matriarchal culture. And the genesis of a matriarchal culture is the end of patriarchy. So patriarchy must do this in order to continue to exist. Patriarchy must break the spirit of all within it into either dominators or into dominated in order to continue to exist. And because it must do this, it can never change. It can only pretend to change. It can lie, it can promise, it can threaten, but it can never be anything except what it is. A system which survives through theft, through the enslavement of the minds of those whose bodies are required to be exploited. Because only women are able to be mothers, we are the only way to gain new members of this culture. There are no mothers. There are no children. If there are no children, there is no future. We are the only way that patriarchy can survive. If our children are not raised up in the bounds of this abusive relationship, not raised up to believe, whether consciously or unconsciously, that females are inferior and must be subservient to males, then patriarchy dies out after one generation. So this is why tokens are used. Those of us who start to wake up to the fact that we don't want to raise our children to believe in male supremacy, we must be either eradicated or we must be brainwashed. Like an abusive husband who brings flowers and promises, but also wields threats and lies, patriarchy has learned how to use different tactics to maintain power. Over the last 200 years of women slowly waking up to the reality of our exploitation, to the reality of our reproductive enslavement, over the last 200 some odd years of the emergence of feminism, patriarchy has not been quietly allowing us to escape. No. Patriarchy has learned. And what patriarchy has learned is this: the women can never be allowed to be truly free. So those who are completely submissive can either be hoodwinked with promises and lies, or crushed with punishments and threats of punishments. Those of us who have suffered a beating at the hands of the man who claims to love us, we are very aware of the reality of punishment and of the constant threat of more punishment. And we are very aware of what this constant threat of more punishment and the random application of actual punishment does to us. The fact that these stories are all over our media, both on the news and in so-called entertainment, ensures that every single woman knows very, very well exactly what can happen to her. We all know about the punishments, and we all know deep within our unconsciousness that this threat applies to every single one of us. This is the stick. There is also a carrot. We are also constantly shown those few rare women who manage to have lives of dignity and comfort. We are shown this as proof that it is only an individual woman who is to blame for her own suffering. Those women, those who manage to succeed, whether it is in academia or the corporate world or sports, the arts, those women who manage to rise to the top in whatever way are tokens. Those women who have happy marriages where they are treated with respect, cherished, who are never abused, and whose children are not neglected or abused, are tokens. These tokens are dangled in front of us constantly to entice us to capitulate. Tokens are a very specific form of the magnificent bribe, a form used for those who are partway down the hierarchy of our society. Understanding this hierarchy is absolutely foundational to understanding this trap that we all live in. An individual person's location on the hierarchy is determined by who they physically are. Determined by sex, first and foremost, because all women must be controlled in order to control reproduction and socialization. This is the most foundational. And this is where male supremacy arises. But then, in addition to that, location on the hierarchy is also determined by the ethnic heritage of a person. Because those who have descended from conquerors are deemed to be superior to those who they have conquered and who have descended from those who they have conquered. Those who they have exploited, oppressed, those who they have committed atrocities upon. There's no end to the brutality employed to conquer lands and peoples, because there is no end to the greed, no end to the devouring of Wetiko, no end to the perversion of human lives into property, into things, into slaves. This is where white supremacy arises. In addition to male supremacy, we must understand white supremacy. Radical feminism has been about critically analyzing the structure and practice, the cosmology of male supremacy. Not all radical feminist scholars have understood the way that male supremacy is not the only instance of this kind of hierarchical cosmology. Some have. Yes, it is true. But it is really the work of those scholars who are themselves victims of white supremacy that has actually fleshed out a greater understanding of this system of values and the worldwide civilization that has grown from that world view. So yes, we must understand male supremacy, but we also must understand white supremacy. We must understand the idea of hierarchy that underpins Wetiko logic, Wetiko cosmology, Wetiko culture. All fine distinctions in terms of one's location on the hierarchy arise from one of these two supremacies. All determinations of inferiority arise from either male supremacy or from white supremacy. That's why the people at the very top of the hierarchy are most likely to be white men. And if they're not, they're tokens. Anyone else who happens to be closer to the top than the rest of their group or their subgroup is simply a token. Tokens are a distraction from the truth of the hierarchy. They are not proof that the hierarchy does not exist. They are never proof that reform has, in fact, occurred. Tokens are a promise and threat, and tokens are a lie. Tokens don't change the fact that the vast majority of people are placed on the hierarchy exactly where their sex and their ethnicity are deemed to determine their value. And for everyone, except for those few tokens, what you get in life is determined entirely by where you are on that hierarchy. Those who are right at the very tippy top, they get only the full, magnificent bribe. They do not have to be threatened, punished, because they are the ones receiving all of the benefits, all of the privileges gathered up and extracted from those lower down on the hierarchy. They are allowed and encouraged, and to be fully honest, required even to enact the punishments, the threats, and the lies on those below them to ensure the maintenance of the hierarchical power structure. But they themselves only face the threat of punishment if they fail to fulfill their role as the enforcers of that hierarchy. Each person maintains their place on the hierarchy by capitulating to those who are their betters, those higher up, and at the same time ensuring the compliance of those who are placed beneath them through the means allotted to them to enact the hierarchy upon those subordinates. And one of the most important means used nowadays is this use of tokens and the constant gaslighting that accompanies the use of tokens. Because if you are not successful, then it is your fault. Just look at this person, we are all told. Just look at how this person has succeeded so well. So that means that anyone who fails is just a failure. Tokens are quite simply a tool of manipulation. A tool used to maintain things exactly the way they are. A tool used to disempower any threat to the status quo. Tokens are not proof that reform is occurring. Rather, they are the opposite. In the past, it was acceptable and effective to use more obvious forms of control of inferiors. But many of the attempts at reform have led to these more obvious methods being abandoned in favor of subtler forms of manipulation. They don't stop, they just change their tactics. But just like when an abusive husband might stop beating his wife right in the face and buy her some flowers and then switch to emotional and mental abuse, this does not mean that the abuse has ended. It has just changed form. The abuser is now employing a new set of tactics. A man who completely believes that he is entitled to control his wife, his property, his woman, will not ever stop behaving this way. As Lundy Bancroft, the world's foremost expert on abusive men, says, this is a problem of values. An abusive man won't stop because he truly believes that he should act this way. He holds values that tell him that he is behaving as he should behave. These are his values. And his behavior can never change unless his values change. Values are core beliefs. Beliefs held so deeply that they are assumed to just be the way things are, and the way things always have been, and the way that things always must be. Beliefs held so deeply and considered to be so completely unquestionable that they form the very core of one's being. Core beliefs about what is right and about what is wrong. Core beliefs about how the world should be. Core beliefs about the very structure of the universe. Cosmology. Now, although there is a branch of physics that is called cosmology, please understand that cosmology is truly a religious structure. Our core beliefs determine our values, determine what we deem to be sacred. John Michael Greer is a wonderful writer, primarily of nonfiction, who is also a pagan like myself, specifically a druid, actually. And one of his greatest contributions to understanding is that he has explained how faith in science is actually the foundational belief of our culture's secular religion of constant growth and progress. Greer has a really terrific quote, and I actually pulled this from a video that I watched. I'll link it in the description, about how we in our culture worship the ideal of a glorious Star Trek future of man, conqueror of nature, metastasizing across the universe. This is such an evocative image, isn't it? Spaceships spreading across the galaxies as the triumphant conquistadors of the great technological progress. Progress is an example of a core belief. Progress is also an example of something called an authoritarian technique. I partly described authoritarian techniques in part 1. This is a concept that was originated by the technological philosopher Lewis Mumford, who also originated the idea of the magnificent bribe. Now, authoritarian techniques are the suite of social systems underlying the creation, use, and maintenance of a particular technology. Mumford taught that authoritarian techniques both give rise to authoritarian social structures and also trap us into those structures. Guns are an example of an authoritarian technique. To explain better, I will contrast this against an example of the opposite. I will contrast it against what Mumford calls a democratic technique. The bow and arrow is a democratic technique. Once you have learned the skills required to create and to use a bow and arrows, those bow and arrows can easily be created from materials found in nature. Once you have the skills, you know you can do it. There's nothing stopping you. So pretty much anyone can use this technique. Now, you don't have to be part of an authoritarian society to gain access to the materials required. And you can easily use a bow and arrows and easily make more arrows whenever you need to do so. So, since anyone can easily use this technique, it is democratic. It is available to all people, and they do not have to submit to an authority in order to use this technique. But a gun is an authoritarian technique. First of all, a gun is made of metal. Metal must be mined and smelted and worked by a smith at a forge. Mining is terrible and dangerous work and cannot easily be done by only one person working alone. To get enough ore to smelt into any quantity of metal takes a very long time indeed, and a lot of back-breaking work, and a lot of work that is very damaging to the ecosystem. Hundreds of hours working in cramped, dark, and dangerous tunnels underground. Once you get the ore, to smelt that ore and also to fire the forge later requires charcoal or fossil coal. Fossil coal must also be mined. More mining, more cutting down trees to shore up the tunnels, more dumping ore on the surface and destroying more ecosystems. Again, none of this can be done by one person working alone. In fact, in history, we see that the advent of the concept and practice of slavery arose concurrently with the practice of mining. Now, once the gun is made, more metal will be required for ammunition. Also, gunpowder will be required to fire the ammunition out of the gun. Now, firing a gun is not easy, and it is very hard on the body. Shoulders can be broken by the kickback of the gun when it is fired. So there's a lot of skill required. And of course, the decision about who is allowed to own and to use a gun is one that only a complex society can make. And every one of these steps requires much knowledge and much skill. And every one of these steps requires hundreds of hours of labor in terrible conditions that no sane person would willingly submit to. So every one of these steps requires a highly organized and tightly controlled set of social structures to make it happen. And because more ammunition is always going to be required, those structures of strict control must always be maintained. The finished guns must also be controlled by the same structures which created them, because the power that a gun confers must be controlled, and that control will be exerted by whatever means are necessary. That control will be exerted with promises, threats, and lies, so guns are an authoritarian technique. There are many others. The details are different from technique to technique, but their nature always remains the same. They all trap us because they require that strict social hierarchy in order to be created, in order to be used, and in order to be maintained. Authoritarian techniques seduce us with promises, and authoritarian techniques trap us with threats and trap us with lies. Authoritarian techniques are a vector of Wetiko. A vector is a means of transmission of a disease. Authoritarian techniques spread Wetiko. And progress, the belief that we can solve every single problem that could ever possibly occur with technology, is itself an authoritarian technique. Progress is where human supremacy arises, the ultimate supremacy. Derek Jensen helped me to see and to understand this, to understand human supremacy. He uses a quote from Richard Dawkins to explain this. Now, I don't have the whole thing memorized like Derek does. He can quote it almost word for word. But what I will do is I will give you the gist of it. This is basically it. We base part of our beliefs about how the world works on our ability to dominate the natural world, to dissect and to experiment upon it and then control it, so that we can always be getting better, getting bigger, always be getting more out of nature. As I said, Not Dawkins' exact words, but it is important to give credit where it is due. So that really does display that attitude, displays that core belief underlying science, underlying the faith in technological progress. Dawkins explains it perfectly. And this is why Derek uses the quote to explain this and to explain the we are dominating nature, that we are being human supremacists. He uses it to demonstrate the unquestioned assumption that there can never be any boundaries to science and progress, controlling absolutely everything. No boundaries to brutality and no boundaries to greed. Exploitation in the service of constant growth. And of course, perpetual growth on a finite planet is just not possible. It's in direct contradiction to actual reality. And yet, we believe this. We have faith that this constant growth will always happen. It's the underpinning assumption that lies beneath economics and our entire way of life. We all unconsciously believe in that faith that Greer named. We all unconsciously believe in a glorious Star Trek future of humanity metastasizing its way across the universe. As soon as I heard this phrase from Greer, it hit me like a punch in the gut because I recognized it as a core belief. I certainly did believe in this once. I know now that it is just a fantasy, even though it's called science fiction. But it's what I was raised on, that is for darn sure. My grandfather, who I was very close to, was always criticizing various denominations of the Christian church that we had all been raised in. But he wholeheartedly believed in science. And in science fiction. And we spent a lot of time watching old episodes of Star Trek. Grandpa even had a framed picture of Bill Shatner as Captain Kirk hanging on the wall in the living room. So yeah, this is definitely a core belief, a story that we tell ourselves about how the world works, about how things should be. But without getting into the specific full details of everything which makes up our beliefs, what I really want you to understand is how important the cosmology of a culture is in terms of determining what that culture looks like, how it functions, and how the members of that culture behave. I want you to understand what cosmology actually is. Because what cosmology is this. It is how we assume the world does function and how it should function. And we are taught those beliefs, sometimes without even realizing that we are being taught by all the stories that we are told throughout our whole lives. Sometimes it's obvious that we are being taught, like we're being taught in school as children, but often it is very much less obvious. Stories in books are captured forms of the old stories that were once shared in groups and families, stories told around the fireside. But nowadays, we are told stories mostly on our screens. Movie screens, television screens, computer screens. And make no mistake, it is not just for entertainment that we are told these stories. We are being taught core beliefs. Even supposedly educational or news programming is still telling us stories, even if only in the way that some stories are not featured, not reported, or not told about everything that happens. These stories are told over and over And we recognize the themes underlying them. We recognize the messages that are carried there. Over time, and through repetition, these stories acquire a level of transcendent meaning. Because they are not just individual stories playing out a singular narrative. They are actually examples of great stories. Not just a tale of an individual man and of an individual woman, but rather a timeless story of boy meets girl and boy captures girl. Not just a tale of Captain Kirk exploring, meeting some green aliens, but rather a great story of man, the great explorer and conqueror of all. These are tales that don't just tell us what happened, but rather these are tales that teach us what should happen. This is a neat little definition that I pulled off Google, and I think it explains it very well. When a cosmology is expressed in the form of a narrative tale that explains or illustrates the beliefs of a culture, it is said to be a myth. Cosmological myths make the culture's ideas of the origin and structure of the universe generally intelligible and broadly accessible. These tales are myths. That is what a great story is. They are patterns which have different individual details slotted in to an underlying structure which communicates these core beliefs, these values. And just as Lundy Bancroft has told us, an abusive male can't stop abusing because his values tell him that he should behave this way. Everything he has been taught, consciously and unconsciously, throughout his whole entire life, and for the lives of generations going back to the very advent of patriarchy, tells him that he is supreme and that he must dominate and control his inferiors. Everything that he has been taught for his whole entire life tells him that this is what women exist for, to serve and to worship him, and that he must ensure that his woman behaves this way, or he must punish her. That if she does not behave submissively, then she cannot be allowed to have any of the things that are given only to good women, given only to good mothers, given only to tokens. Yeah, we're back to tokens now. All of these structures, strategies, tactics are interwoven to keep us trapped. We have to start to see these interwoven structures if we are going to break free of them. This is a quote from the work of Mary Daly. She is one of the greatest radical feminist scholars. I had to work very hard to get my hands on a copy of her book. It was out of print. I got it in PDF. The book is called Gynecology. She has others. That's the one I read. No kind of tokenism in a transcendence sapping system will free ourselves from the spell of patriarchal myth. As long as that myth, system of myths, prevails, it is conceivable that there be a society comprised even of 50% female tokens, women with anatomically female bodies, but totally male identified, male possessed brains, spirits. The myth spell itself of phallocratism must be broken. Mary Daly. So, as radical feminists, we understand that any benefits of reform are enjoyed only by tokens, and only in order to maintain the status quo. Tokens are the ones who avoid punishment and the threat of punishment by capitulating and believing the promises and the lies. When they capitulate, they ensure the continuation of the system. The system remains in place, and so it must find other females to exploit in the ways that the token is allowed to avoid as payment for her capitulation. Thus, the tokens enjoy privileges which are bought at the expense of other women. Normally, the other women who are exploited, so that the token may have comfort, are women who are placed lower on the hierarchy by some other factor that patriarchy deems to be inferior. The other women are women who are somehow deemed other. Women from ethnic heritage groups deemed to be inferior, or from lower economic classes of the same group. In some way, these women are deemed to be inferior. And so the women higher up the hierarchy are allowed, encouraged, even to be truthful, required to exploit them. This is where, for instance, a rich woman has housekeepers and nannies from an ethnic group deemed to be inferior and worthy of exploitation. We are all familiar with this particular kind of pattern. Sure, you've seen it. And this pattern means that reform has not actually occurred, because justice which is applied selectively is not truly justice. Rather, it is a mask worn by injustice to allow it to continue. It is a lie. Women who exploit other women so that they can live comfortable lives of privilege are not changing anything. So, yes, patriarchy simply cannot be reformed. The only way for females to find justice, to escape exploitation, is to end patriarchy, not to reform it. Only when all females are free from exploitation are we, any of us, truly free. But it is not just male supremacy that must be ended, not just sexism, because it is not just sex that is used as an excuse for exploitation, not just sex that is used as an excuse, as a justification for atrocity. Ethnic heritage is used as an excuse for white supremacy, as an excuse for racism. And those white women who exploit women of other ethnic heritage in order to enjoy privilege are not changing anything. Women can never be free until all women of every ethnicity are free. I knew this. I had understood that this was so from my studies of radical feminist critical analysis. I knew about male supremacy and I knew about white supremacy. But what I was studying now, though, it was exploding this understanding onto a different level. After I read that very first article in Cosmos, Journal for Global Transformation, and started seeing that it was the very concept of supremacy, the very concept of hierarchy underlying all of the evil in the world, absolutely everything started to make sense. Now that I was coming to understand the nature of Wetiko culture, coming to understand human supremacy as well, not just male supremacy, not just white supremacy, but human supremacy, I was blowing my own mind wide open again. Understanding that this was the case not just for females, not just for all humans. And this is the biggest leap for me here, that this is the case for all children of our Mother Earth. Hierarchy is an atrocity justified by cosmology, and this atrocity is perpetrated by humans on each other, and this atrocity is also perpetrated by humans on every other living being, and on every web of being and care, and on every ecosystem community which forms our beautiful planet and home. Hierarchy is an atrocity justified by cosmology. Hierarchy is Wetiko. We can never reform a system of hierarchy into anything that isn't evil. It is in seeing others as other, seeing others as something to use, to exploit, to dominate and control and use up, that we are become Wetiko. And once become Wetiko, we then move on to the use of any and every strategy, structure, and manipulation technique that we can use to consume others. There are no boundaries to our brutality, perversions, and greed. We seduce with promises and lies, and control with threats and punishments. Okay, so that explains how Wetiko works by infecting our minds with the idea of hierarchy, and how interwoven structures and justifications and tactics for enforcing and maintaining that hierarchy are the foundation of Wetiko culture. I'm going to wrap up part 2 of Explaining Wetiko Culture now. In part 3, we will be discussing the different scales that Wetiko can operate on, because it's not just on the individual level, it is on the cultural level, and it also operates on the family level. And we will also talk about the difficulties that we experience if we try to escape from Wetiko on any of those scales. I want to thank each of you, because this kind of material is not what most people think of as fun. It is not happy, fun, joy. And yet, you have now watched to the end of part 2. Wow, thanks. It's really good work on your part. It is by understanding these things that we can, each of us, escape from Wetiko logic in our own minds, in our own lives. And it is only by joining together as a community of radical homemakers that we can actually begin the work of recreating matriarchal cultures. Patriarchy does its work. Wetiko does its work by destroying bonds, especially maternal bonds. So, by first becoming healthy in our own selves, and then creating new bonds with others who are also always becoming healthy and healthier, that we can begin to reweave the web that is a matriarchal culture. We can begin to rematriate. We, each of us, make ourselves a home. So I'm sending a huge thank you to all of you. Thank you for watching part 2. Please come back to watch part 3. If you are finding these videos to be helpful, which I hope is the case, I would be very honored if you would like the video. And I would also really love to have you as a subscriber. Would you please join our community of radical homemakers? By subscribing, you will hear about new videos, and I am working on a whole bunch of new stuff. You're also going to increase the likelihood of other people seeing these videos. What an easy way to change the world, because everybody who sees them has the ideas in their mind. The more people that we can reach, the better. And the more people that we can together help to become healthy, the more people that are working to escape Wetiko culture, and the more people that can join our web of community, the better. I have also created a Discord server for radical homemakers to further this work of weaving community bonds and to give back to all those who have donated to my fundraiser. I had to create a fundraiser to help myself and my eldest son, Man Cub, who's the only cub that I have living with me right now. We share this apartment here, which I call City Den, and right now we're facing eviction. So if you're curious about why that happened, I will link the video that I made describing the situation and about the fundraiser and about how we got here. So I am sending an invitation to the Discord community to everyone who has made a donation of any size. And this community will continue and expand from now on, even once this fundraiser, this particular one, is over. So if you wish to make a donation and join the Discord, please contact me, either by email or through Facebook, and they will both be linked in the description below. I am working away at the rest of this series and at a whole bunch of other material too. Thank you so much for your patience with me, because many of you have been with me for a year and a half while I've been learning and teaching myself every step of how to make these videos. It is only by sharing my journey with you that I can give any kind of meaning to my own suffering and to the suffering of my children. Many of you, I know, have also experienced some of these same kinds of suffering. We all really need to escape Wetiko culture so that we can make a place, we can make a way of life where this kind of suffering is not perpetrated upon us, so that we can make ourselves a home. I hope that you can each find your own peace in as many ways and as many places as possible. Always remember that I love you.
Waste of words, waste of breath, 'cause I've got none to say. Thoughts stay burned inside my chest, can't take it one more day. No matter how much pain I'm in, no matter how, gotta think, I gotta breathe. Changes to come, 'cause the light's just around the corner. Life must go on. What won't kill me will make me stronger. When I'm falling down on my knees, I will rise and try to believe that changes will come, 'cause the light's just around the corner. There's ways to go, ways to leave. Been thinking about them all, 'cause life's too hard, life's too mean. But I can't just jump and fall. No matter how much pain